It's Thursday, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make a little no-sew axolotl. So we have made axolotls before, but this guy, where our previous one was an axolotl, this guy is more of an axolotl. A little no-sew, all in one piece axolotl. So let's get into it. Alright, let's talk about tools and materials. For today's project, you're going to need 8-ply 100% acrylic yarn in 2 colours. So 1 colour for your main body and 1 colour for the fin. You're also going to need a pair of 9mm safety eyes and some stuffing, as well as a 3.5mm hook, some scissors and some stitch markers. So while a piece of scrap yarn is normally perfectly fine as a stitch marker, for this particular project I do recommend that you have either a bobby pin or like the clip style stitch markers, just because we are marking chains, so scrap yarn won't be super effective for that. Now you'll notice that there is no hardest working tortoise here, and that is because this axolotl is made entirely in one piece, start to finish, no sewing required at all, so we've told the hardest working tortoise he can have a break this week. A written version of today's pattern will be made available to my patrons and will also be listed on my Etsy, and I will leave links to both in the description down below for anybody who's interested. Okay, so the axolotl today is a very quick and easy little project. We actually start inside the mouth. So grab your hook and your body colour, which for me is a very pale pink today, and we're going to start with a magic ring of 6. Now you could also just use the chain 2 and then 6 single crochet in the second chain method to start if you prefer. I just have a preference for magic rings. So that's our starting point. We're then going to work 3 repeats of a single crochet and then an increase. So an increase is when you work 2 single crochet into the same stitch. So there's our first one, and we're going to do that 2 more times. Now, the eagle-eyed amongst you might notice that I am doing invisible increases, which is when you insert your hook through the front loop only for the first stitch, and then through both loops for the second stitch. And it's just a preference thing. It's entirely up to you if you want to work your increases both stitches through both loops. I just prefer the invisible method myself. So that should bring us up to 9 stitches around, and we're going to count and check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We're all good. So what we're actually building here is the little pocket that's going to form the 3-dimensional mouth. Now the really cool thing about this axolotl is you don't even need needles to sew on a face. So we are now going to work the depth of the mouth. So we are now going to build up the sort of the depth of the mouth by working 3 rows of 9 single crochet for a combined total of 27 stitches. (26) 27. So it looks a little bit funny at the moment. I need you to trust the process. When I'm crocheting, I've got my right side outwards. And the next step is a little counterintuitive, but what I want you to do is turn this so your right side is facing in. Like that. So you'll see I've got the tail of my magic ring, I've got the wrong side of my stitches facing outwards, and I have this little pocket saying hello, hello. And we're going to work the next row basically so that this is inside out. And keeping in mind that when doing that, the next stitch that we work into is actually on the side facing away from us. Now this is going to resolve itself really, really fast in the next row. It's just this makes it really easy to make sure that your mouth ends up the right size instead of tucking too much of the face in. So this is the next stitch here that we work into. See how it's not on the side facing me, it's on the side on the further side away. And we're going to work 3 repeats of a single crochet and an increase, and then another single crochet. So that's our first repeat, and we're going to do that 2 more times to bring us up to 12 stitches in our round. I want you to take that row and kind of roll it outwards a little bit, just that last row that we did. You should start to see the little mouth forming. So we are now working up the outside of the head. So row 7 is 2 repeats of 5 single crochet. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, bringing us to one of the corners of our mouth. So if yours is currently rotated like this, I want you to flatten it so that the next stitch forms the corner of your mouth. And we're going to work 3 single crochet all into the same stitch. There we go. So that's 1 repeat, and we're going to do that again. 5 single crochet, around to the second corner of our mouth, and we're going to put 3 single crochet into that again. You'll see that I'm deliberately letting the stitches fold outwards, and these will eventually fold back over the top of that initial pocket that we made, but don't worry about it too much. If yours is still out the wrong way, pop it in now. Just make sure that you have 2 rows of stitches showing on the outside. And that's your little axolotl smile, because he's a friendly little guy. So row 8 starts with 6 single crochet, and you can start using a stitch marker in the last stitch of your row if that's going to help you keep count. Then 3 single crochet all into the same stitch. 7 single crochet. 3 single crochet all into the same stitch. And a single crochet to finish off our round. Now that should leave you with 20 stitches around in total, and it should be a very long oval shape because we've been placing our increases pretty specifically on the 2 sides of the mouth, those chubby little cheeks. So here we're going to work 3 rounds of 20 single crochet for a combined total of 60 stitches. And what that's going to do is just help us build up the depth of the head, make him a little less of a pancake face. That's 3. Now as I work that, you'll notice that it's kind of curled over on me. I'm just going to pop it back in the right way. So in the next row, we are going to be making the little fronds that stick out on either side of the head, little gills. I am going to be working mine in the same color today, but you can change colors for yours if you prefer. So for this row, I do recommend having a couple of stitch markers handy, ready to go. So we start row 12 by working 8 single crochet. And then in the next stitch, which should line up roughly with one of the corners of your mouth, we are going to build our first set of fronds. Now, if you look closely at the top of the stitch, you should see that each stitch has 2 loops on top of it. We've got a loop facing us, which is the front loop, and we have a loop facing away from us, which is the back loop. Now, I want you to take one of your stitch markers. Again, I do recommend either a bobby pin or a stiff clip type of one rather than a piece of scrap yarn. And I want you to mark just the front loop, like so. And then we're going to be working these fronds only through the back loop. We're going to start by chaining 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then we're going to turn. Starting in the second chain from our hook, we're going to work 4 slip stitches back down that chain. Just like so. There's our first little frond, and we're going to slip stitch into that back loop. We've marked the front loop of it, we're going to slip stitch into the back loop. So there's 1. We are going to chain 5 a second time. Once again, turn and work 4 slip stitches down those chains. And slip stitch into the same back loop as before. So we've marked the front loop, we're working all of these into the back loop. Then we have 1 more, so we're going to chain 5, turn, and work 4 slip stitches back down the chain. Like so. And that is the last of our little frills. So at this point, we are going to work a single crochet into the next stitch along, back to working in both loops. Now I want you to leave this stitch marker in. We're going to be using that front loop in the following row. But first we're going to single crochet around the underside of this chin. So that's our first one, and we're going to do 9 more for 10 single crochet in total. Which should bring us to about the same place on the other side. And we're going to take another stitch marker, once again mark just the front loop. And we're going to repeat the process of making those little frills. Are they gills? Anyway, we're going to repeat the process of making them again. So chain 5, turn and work 4 slip stitches down, and slip stitch into the back loop. It's 1. We're going to do that again. Slip stitch into the back loop, and one last time, chaining 5, 4 slip stitches, and we don't actually work the next single crochet because we're at the end of the row, but there are our little frilly bits made. So there you have an entire axolotl head. And at this point, I encourage you, note that this last frill hasn't been attached down yet. That happens at the start of the next row. But at this point, we're going to stop. We're going to pop our eyes in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find the corners of my mouth. I'm going to move sort of 2 visible rows of stitches in, and I'm going to pop an eye in like that on either side. So that's where my little eyes are going to go. Just a happy little fishy dude. And snap your backs on. See if we can't get the good poppy sound, shall we? Oh, that was good. There we go. So that's the face done. See, no sewing required, as promised. So now we've done that, grabbing our hook again, and we are going to work row 13, which is going to just help lock these gills into place. So row 13 starts with 4 decreases across the top of the head. Now, there are 2 different ways to work decreases. There's the way I prefer, and then there's kind of like a more default standard practice kind of way, I think. The default way to do a decrease is you insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over and pull up another loop, so you've got 3 loops on your hook, and then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops, like that. So that's a perfectly acceptable way to do a decrease. I believe that's the way most people know how to do it. Unless they've been around here for a while, because everybody knows now by now I do invisible decreases. To do an invisible decrease, you pick up the front loop of both stitches, you yarn over and you pull up a loop, so you've just got 2 loops on your hook, and then you yarn over and complete the decrease. Now, I prefer invisible decreases because I think they're smaller and less visible, but regular decreases should work absolutely fine for this pattern if you prefer. So that's our first decrease, and we're going to do 3 more of those across the top of the head. And I do suggest that whatever kind of decrease you start using, you use it for the rest of the pattern. So if you start doing regular decreases, use them all the time. If you start using invisible decreases, try and use those as much as possible. There we go. So it's just closing in the back of the head. And this brings us to possibly one of the trickiest parts of this whole pattern, but it's honestly not that bad, particularly if you've used a stitch marker as I have suggested. And what we're going to do is we're going to work 2 single crochet into this front loop, but we're going to be doing them in between the frills. That's going to help them stick out at fun angles. So you've got your yarn at the back, your hook at the front. We're going to insert our hook into the front loop that we've marked. I'm going to pull that yarn through the middle of those fronds. I'm going to yarn over and pull up a loop. So I've got my 2 loops on my hook, but my frond is at the back. If I complete this stitch now, it will be stuck inside, and we don't want that. So instead what I'm going to do is just poke it to the front, like that. So now the frill's in front, my 2 loops are still on my hook, yarn over, and complete the stitch. So that's one little frill pulled to the front. We need to do the same kind of stitch again for the second frill. So tuck my yarn around the back. I'm going to insert my hook into the same front loop that we marked before. Pull my yarn in between the other 2 frills, yarn over and pull up a loop. Tuck the little frill to the front, which can be a little bit tricky, but we'll make it work. There we go. And complete the stitch. Give it a little tug. So that's our first 2 frills, and we're then going to locate the first single crochet after this final frill, and folding that frill to the front so it stays out of the way. Insert our hook into it and just work a regular single crochet behind that final frill. We can slide that stitch marker out. So that's helping them sort of sit all the way up at a very perky little frilly angle. And all 3 of your single crochets should be behind them. So we are now going to work 9 more single crochet along the bottom of this chin. So that's 10 in total, which is what is written as in the pattern. There's that, which brings us to our second set of frills, and we're going to do the same thing again. So insert our hook through the marked front loop, pull the yarn to the front, yarn over and pull up a loop, tuck the little frill to the front, yarn over and complete our single crochet. So there's one, yarn to the back, insert your hook, wrap it around the frill, yarn over and pull up a loop, tuck the frill to the front, and single crochet. Give them a tug, make sure that they're all the way out, and remove our stitch marker. And once again, we'll be working around the final frill at the start of the next row just because of how the rotation is worked out. But your axolotl should be looking super cute and super friendly so far. Now row 14 starts with 2 decreases, so folding our little frill out of the way, there is our first front loop. And we work our decrease. And there is our second decrease, leading us to the 3 stitches behind your first set of frills. And we're going to work a single crochet 3 together. And that's basically a decrease using 3 stitches instead of 2. And so that means that there are 2 different ways to work it, just like with a regular decrease. So if you're using regular decreases, you can insert your hook through the first stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, insert your hook through the second stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then insert your hook through a third stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, leaving you with 4 loops on your hook, and yarn over and pull through all 4. And that is a single crochet 3 together using like a standard decrease method. Or if you're using invisible decreases like I am, you're going to use your hook to pick up the front loops only of those 3 stitches, yarn over and pull up a loop through all 3, and then yarn over and complete the stitch. Once again, either method is fine for this pattern. From there, we're going to work 2 single crochet, and then 4 increases, so one after the other. This is just going to help slope his little chest down and away from his head. So see that dipping away underneath? That's good, that's what we want. We're then going to work 2 single crochet, and then another single crochet 3 together behind this second set of frills. And that's going to sit slightly lower than you're potentially expecting. That's okay. So at the end of row 14, you should have 16 stitches in your round. And we do! Hooray! So at this point, I am going to take just a little bit of stuffing, and we're going to stuff just the top of the head, just to help it hold its shape a little bit. You don't really want to stuff the bottom jaw because you want it to sit nice and flat to form this little smile. Ooh, it's a little cutie pie. Yeah, I know I've made axolotls before, but this guy's more of an axolotl, and I was aiming for a slightly more realistic look to him. So yeah, we've just stuffed a little bit of stuffing in the top of the head there, and we'll stuff the rest of this after we've built up a bit more of the body. So heading into row 15. So in row 15, we're going to be making the front legs. So once again, I suggest you have some stitch markers handy, ready to go. We're going to start by working a decrease that should fall in the center top of the head. And then we're just going to work 4 single crochet. And so before we make the next stitch, we're going to actually build out the little front leg. So the fun thing about axolotls, and I researched this because it confused me a lot, and it confused me a lot. We originally had 3 toes on each foot, and that's not correct at all. Apparently axolotls have 4 toes on the front legs and 5 toes on the back legs. So we're going to be making some front legs now with 4 toes. So you'll see here that the next stitch is still on the side of the head. If you wanted your leg further down, you can just keep working single crochets until you've got the right position for you. But please be aware that it might throw the rest of your rotation off if you edit this row. So we're going to build the little leg, and we're going to start by chaining 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we're going to chuck a stitch marker into that 5th chain. Now this isn't strictly necessary, but I do think it's going to make the next part a little bit easier. And the next part is, of course, forming 4 little toes for the hand. And we're going to do that using picots. Specifically 3 chain picots in this instance. So we work those by chaining 1 completely normally, then chaining 2, and I like to pull those 2 real tight. So we have 1 normal chain and then 2 really tight chains. Then we're going to work a slip stitch into that first chain that we did. So there is our picot, and then we're going to slip stitch into our marked chain. There's just That's what I mean about it simplifying the process. It's just like you can so easily see the chain that we're supposed to be slip stitching into. So there is our first little piggy, and we're going to do that 3 more times. So picot, like so, and slip stitch into the marked chain. 2 little piggies. Three little piggies, and 1 more. So now we have our 4 little piggies. I want you to go back to the chain we made and work 4 single crochet, 1 single crochet into each chain all the way back to the body. Pop that little stitch marker out. And there is our little flippity floppity axolotl foot with the 4 little toes it's supposed to have. To work 7 single crochet around the underside of the axolotl to where we want to put the second front leg. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. You just sort of give it a good look-see, make sure that yours are sitting even. And we're going to make the second leg the exact same way. So we start by chaining 5, mark the 5th chain, and then work a picot and a slip stitch. Oh, I've got to finish the picot first. Getting a little picocious. Slip stitch back to the slip stitch in the marked chain, and repeat that 3 more times until you have 4 little toes. I suppose they're fingers technically in this case. Okay, and now we just work 4 single crochet, back up our chain. And pop that stitch marker out. So now we're back to the base. We are going to work just 3 single crochet to get back to the start of our round. Now, it might be a little hard to tell at this point, but you should have 15 stitches in your round. We're going to be skipping all of the stitches of the legs, and so just like we did with the frills, we'll be working around them to like pinch them and cement them in place. Just checking for whether or not we're crooked, and I don't think we are. It might have a slight little tilt to it, but I think it's fine. Heading into row 16, we are going to start by working 5 single crochet, which should bring us around to where the first leg is. 2, 3, 4, and 5. So then we have our leg, and we want to just pull that leg off to one side, find the first single crochet after it, and we're going to continue with 7 single crochet around. So there's our second leg, and just in case you didn't catch it the first time, I feel like I did that really quickly. I'm folding that leg forward, finding the single crochet that falls immediately after it. So in this case, it's this one here. And I'm just inserting my hook into the stitch and working a regular single crochet such that it falls behind that leg. And then we have 2 more to get back to the start of the round. He's happy to meet ya. He's so cute. I'm sorry, I just think he's so cute. At this point, we're going to work 5 rows of 15 single crochet in each row for a combined total of 75 stitches. $74, $75. There we are at the end of row 21. We've got a little long body, and you can see the little chest slope that we built up when we did those increases at the base of the neck as well. Now, I actually like the way these limbs kind of flip around a lot, because to me it just looks like he's a swimming axolotl. Kind of a finger puppet at this point too. But anywho, so in the next row we are going to be giving him back legs with 5 toes on them, as discussed. So we're going to start just by working 9 single crochet around to where we want the first leg to be. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that should bring us roughly even with the front leg. So for these back legs, they need to have 5 toes on them. And because these front ones ended up with that little hole in the middle and adding a 5th toe actually really exaggerates that hole, we're going to construct them very slightly differently. This time around, you are going to want 2 stitch markers to make 1 leg. We're going to start by chaining 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And I want you to take your stitch markers and I want you to mark 7. And I want you to mark 6. Like that. Easy peasy. You're going to identify the 5th chain. So we've marked 2 chains and then the one after that is the 5th chain. And I want you to work a slip stitch into that 5th chain. It's going to create this tiny little loop. And now we're going to start making toes. So we start by working our picot, same as we did for the fingers. So chain 3. Slip stitch into the first chain. So there's my first picot, and I'm going to turn. So grabbing those stitch markers and flipping the whole thing around. We're going to turn around so we're facing them. So the markers closest to us is marking chain 7, and we're going to slip stitch into that marked chain. So there's our first little toe. We're going to picot again. 1, 2, 3, and slip stitch. And slip stitch again into the same marked chain. I want you to remove that marker. So only chain 6 is marked now, and we're going to put 3 toes into it. Now, if this is too fiddly, you can absolutely just approach these the exact same way we did the front legs by working all 5 toes into the same chain at the end of the leg. But this way it left a little bit less of an obvious gap. And we're going to slip stitch into the only remaining marked chain, which is chain 6. It's our first little toe, and we're going to do 2 more, both into that same chain. 4th little piggy, slip stitch, and 5th, all in there. And pop that second marker out. We're then going to go back to our original chains here. We will be working in the back of them technically because they're facing away from us because we turned our work, so do keep that in mind. But we are just going to work 4 single crochet back to base. I will show this whole process again slowly with the second leg. So if you didn't quite catch it this time, never fear, we'll be doing it again in a minute. There is our 5-toed little slippery foot, and all of that extra effort was just so that there was a little tiny little piece of yarn in the middle there, so that we just didn't have a big open gap like with the front feet. So working back into the stitches of our body, we are going to work 5 single crochet around. 2, 3, 4, and 5. And we're going to form the second leg. So once again, we're going to chain 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. We're going to mark the 6th and the 7th chain. So 6, 7. We're going to slip stitch into the 5th chain to form our little loop. And we're going to picot and turn, slip stitching into the 7th chain, which should be the marked chain closest to where we are. Picot again. Slip stitch again into the 7th chain. So that's 2 toes into the 7th chain. And now we're going to work 3 toes into the 6th chain. So we're going to pop out the marker in our 7th chain, put that to one side, and we're going to picot and slip stitch into our last remaining chain. So that's 1. We're going to do that 2 more times. Pop that stitch marker out. And looking back at the chains that it took to get us here, now the front of the chains are facing away from us because we turned our work, but that's okay. You don't work again into the 5th chain. That's where we slip stitched originally. We're going to instead work 4 single crochet down the 4 remaining unused chains back to the body. 2, 3, and 4. And turn so that you're like facing the right way again, stitch wise. So there are our wobbly little back legs. So we have a limbed axolotl, and we have just 1 single crochet to finish our round. There we go. So at this point we can stop and stuff our little tube. So again, I do think that this guy's kind of a nice candidate for a finger puppet if you wanted him to be. There we go. So that is what we look like. So now we need to slope from the body into the tail. So that brings us to row 23. So row 23 starts with 8 single crochet. So, and then we're going to do a decrease. So the first stitch of that decrease is the last stitch before the leg. Then we fold that leg forward, and the second stitch of the decrease is the first single crochet after the leg. So, and that is one of those moments where I will break my invisible decrease rule. Just use a regular one there, it's easier and it's hidden by the leg anyway. We're then going to work 3 single crochet across the tum. And we're going to decrease again. So once again, the first stitch of the decrease is the stitch before the leg. Fold the leg out the way. Second stitch of the decrease is the first stitch after the leg. And that all takes place behind the leg so it sticks out at the front, which will bring us back to the start of our row. Row 24, we're going to start shaping the tail. So we start by working 2 decreases. 1, 2. We're then going to work 3 single crochet all into the same stitch. Like so. We're then going to work another decrease. And then 2 repeats of a decrease and a single crochet. So there's our first one, and we're going to do that again. So decrease and single crochet. Now that 3 single crochet into the same stitch should be falling in the top center of your back, so that the tail will be worked up from here as like a flat little paddle, and we'll reattach to add a little bit of a fin around the outside of it. So row 25 starts with 3 single crochet. So to form the rest of the tail, you're going to need 2 stitch markers per row for the next 7 rows, so 14 in total. I understand that's a lot. So for this step, scrap yarn is a perfectly acceptable stitch marker and will work fine. It was just for the legs that the hard plastic stitch markers were going to be more helpful. Make sure you have a plan in place for how you're going to be marking these stitches. My plan is 2 strands of scrap yarn, like so. So we've worked the first 3 single crochet for row 25. Then we're going to mark the front loop of the next stitch. Just pulling the yarn through it. And single crochet in the back loop only. Like so. We're going to be using those front loops for the fin later. We're then going to work 4 single crochet through both loops, bringing us to a stitch that should be the center bottom of your axolotl, and we're once again going to mark the front loop, and single crochet into the back loop. Then we have just 1 single crochet to finish our round. That's what we currently look like. And we're going to do the exact same thing in row 26. So 1, 2, 3, mark the front loop. I'm just using the same strand, you'll notice, single crochet in the back loop. 1, 2, 3, 4, mark the front loop, and single crochet in the back loop, and a single crochet to finish the round. That's what the top of him looks like, side and the bottom. So that's the first 2 rows of the tail. In row 27, it starts once again with 3 single crochet and 3. I want you to mark the front loop, and then we're going to be working a decrease using the back loop of the first stitch and both loops of the next stitch. Depending on how badly you're spiraling at this point, you could also choose to use the front loop of the second stitch instead, which will help pull you back into alignment. So that's kind of like a calibrating row. I'm choosing to use the first stitch, but you can use either one of those. We're then going to work 3 single crochet, 1, 2, 3, and then same thing at the bottom. You can pick whichever front loop lines up straightest for you. And on this one here, I'm going to use the second stitch of our decrease to do it. So I'll mark that front loop now, then work our decrease. Just make sure that your decrease doesn't use whichever front loop you want to use for your fin. So there we are at the end of row 27, and you should have 8 stitches in your round. So row 28 starts with 3 single crochet, mark the front loop, single crochet into the back loop, 3 single crochet, 1, 2, 3, mark the front loop, and single crochet into the back loop. For row 29, we're going to start with 2 single crochet and then a decrease. So I'm going to mark the second front loop, not the first, for this particular decrease, like so. Then we work our decrease. So you should end up with like this row of relatively straight front loops at the top and at the bottom. Then going to work 2 more single crochet. Again, I'm going to use the second stitch of our decrease as our marked front loop, and we're going to work another decrease, leaving us with just 6 stitches in our round. For row 30, we're going to work 2 single crochet, mark the front loop, single crochet in the back loop, then 2 single crochet, mark the front loop, single crochet into the back loop. And row 31 is exactly the same. There we go, and we're going to finish off. Now you'll note that we've added no additional stuffing to that, and that's because we want that tail to sit nice and flat. So we have our marked loops at the top, and our marked loops at the bottom are a little bit more higgledy-piggledy, but it's fine. Those stitches actually have a little bit of width to them, which does give you some room to move around. Now, at the end here, what I want you to do is you do still have 6 stitches in your round, but we have a little opening. And the first thing we're going to do is find the stitch closest to our line at the top, and mark the front loop because we do need that one there as well. And we're going to do the same thing at the bottom, and that bottom one should be that final stitch before the finish off. Like so. Now I want you to take your remaining yarn from the tail that we were just crocheting. I want you to pull it through the other 4 remaining front loops, just one at a time, and we're going to pull this closed. And pull, and we're going to tuck that away before we go any further. Okay, so we have our axolotl base, looking very amphibious, hopefully, looking happy to see you. Hello. And we have our marked top and bottom of this tail fin. So now all there is to do is to add the fin itself. So I'm going to attach my fin color. I'm using cream for this. You could use white, you could use a different shade of pink. Axolotls come in a variety of lovely little colours. I actually think this pattern would work really nicely in variegated yarn, but I think they're a little hard to see for pattern videos, so I try not to use them. So yeah, so I've just attached my cream to my hook with a slip knot, and what I'm going to do is find the first marked front loop on top, closest to the body. And I'm going to slip stitch into that one there just to join us on and get us started. Let's just wrangle our yarn here for a second. There we go. Just gonna slip stitch into that sucker. So, and we're now going to work a stitch into each of these front loops, and we're going to work a variety of different stitches. So we've done our slip stitch into the first one. In the second one, we are going to insert our hook and work a single crochet. In the third one, we're going to work a half double crochet, and what that is we yarn over our hook, insert into that front loop, yarn over and pull up a loop. So we have 3 loops on our hook. I'm just going to yarn over and pull through all 3. So a half double crochet is just slightly larger than a single crochet, but smaller than a double crochet. So that's where that fits into this little slope. We're then going to work a double crochet. So you yarn over, insert your hook into the loop, yarn over and pull up a loop. Once again, we have 3 loops on our hook. Yarn over and pull through the first 2 loops, then yarn over again and pull through the next 2 loops. So that's a double crochet, and we're going to do one of those in each of the next 2 stitches as well. So double and double. That's what our fin currently looks like. We should have 2 marked loops left on the top here, and we are going to work a half double crochet. So again, yarn over, insert your hook, yarn over and pull up a loop, then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. Then we're going to just slip stitch in that final marked loop and finish off. We can now pull out our guide yarn, our marking yarn, whoop, leaving us our top tail fin, and we need to do the same thing on the bottom. So we're going to flip him over, reattach our yarn to our hook with a slip knot again, and once again attaching in the first front loop that's closest to the body. Use a slip stitch, then a single crochet, a half double crochet, 3 double crochet, 1, 2, and 3, a half double crochet, and a slip stitch in the final little front loop there, and finish off. Once again, remove our marking yarn, and we're going to tuck all of those ends in. There we go. So there's his little flippery fin, and there is our finished axolotl. Now, if your little frilly bits have gotten a little bit scrumply, like mine have here, you just grab each one, give them a little tug. You can use a little hairspray to help lock them into place if you prefer, but I don't mind giving mine a little tug out. I like the little wibbly wobbly legs on this fellow, because to me that makes him look like he's swimming. I feel like this is perfect for a little aquarium, or a little mobile, little crochet terrarium. But yeah. So yeah, that was our little axolotl pattern for today. I am still working on the baby dinosaur based on the Crossontosaurus, so do keep your eye out for that. But yeah, otherwise I will see you next week. Okay, bye! Now for this particular project I do remekend. Yes, I am going to be playing with this the whole time. Just want to re-record the audio for that row. So row 7 starts with 5 single crochet, presenting to you a little axolotl head. Presenting to you a little axolotl head. So I do recommend that you look up axolotl faces, because otherwise this is going to look really weird. But are you frills trying to crawl up on top of your head? What's happening there? I think it's fine. Fun fact, he used to have a much doofier smile. But we went back and fixed that. So those are your gills. So those are your frills all locked into place. Please forgive me if I'm referring to them as gills or frills. I don't know if I'll catch all of the mistakes in editing. Honey, I can hear you clear as day. There's no point sneaking around. Finding the single crochet that falls immediately after it. Putting the cardboard back where it goes. That's what it looks like from behind, kind of like a little crab. I think he looks just like a little axolotl too, which, you know, is nice. He's getting away! Just adjusting my notes, bear with me folks. And the second stitch of the decrease, blah blah blah. We're just going to reset our audio, sorry guys. There's nobody there. Who am I talking to? We need to frog back and just, or amphibian back in this case. Just throw our counts off a little bit, but we're just trying to make things work a lot. Tall.